And I see we're up.
Okay, thank you. I will call to order the Longmont Planning and Zoning Commission March 16, 2022 meeting. First item is roll call.
Chairman Poland,
Here.
Commissioner Flagg,
Here.
Commissioner Height, Commissioner Kohler,
Here.
Commissioner Lukacs,
Here.
Commissioner Saunders,
Here.
Commissioner Teta.
Sure.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Next is communications from Planning Director Glenn Van Nimwegen.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, I forgot to read this one item, sorry. Anyone wishing to speak during public invited to be heard, which are items 4 and 7, or during any public hearing items, which is item agenda 6A, will need to watch the live stream of the meeting for instructions about how to call to provide public comment at the appropriate times. Instructions will be given during the meeting and displayed on the screen when it is time to call in to provide comments. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person, and each speaker will be asked to state their name and address for the record prior to proceeding with their comments. Please remember to mute the live stream when you're called upon to speak. Instructions for, we will now go ahead and I'll open up the public invited to be heard. Instructions for calling in are provided. The toll-free call-in number is 888-788-0099. Watch the live stream and write down the meeting ID when it's displayed at the screen. Wait for the chairperson to open the public comment and directors callers to call in. When the chairperson says to call in, dial the toll-free number, mute the live stream and listen for instructions on the phone. Callers will hear confirmation that they have entered the meeting and will be told how many others are already participating. Callers will hear the confirmation and will be placed in a virtual waiting room until admitted into the meeting. Once admitted to the meeting, callers will be called upon by the last 3 digits of their phone number and allowed to unmute to provide their comments. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person, and each speaker will be asked to state their name and address for the record prior to proceeding with their comments. Once done speaking, callers should hang up.
Chair and Commission, we are approaching the 5-minute mark. Currently, there are no callers.
Thank you.
Okay, once I see our commission back, I will drop our slide. Still waiting on a few commissioners, but there are still no callers.
Yes, you're waiting for me. I apologize. Turn the video off.
All right, there are no callers. Chair Poland, would you like me to close the public invited to be heard?
Yes, we will close the public invited to be heard. Are you all set, Dallas?
Yep, we are good.
Okay. Next item is item number 5, approval of the February 16, 2022 minutes. Do we have any questions, comments, or motions? Commissioner Height?
Would move to approve the minutes of February 16th, 2022.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Commissioner Saunders?
I second the motion.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? If not, Jane, let's take a vote.
Chairman Poland,
Yes.
Commissioner Flake,
yes,
Commissioner Height,
Aye.
Commissioner Kohler,
Abstain.
Commissioner Lukacs,
yes,
Commissioner Saunders,
Yes.
Commissioner Teta.
Yes.
Chairman Poland, those minutes are approved. 6 approvals, 1 abstention.
Thank you very much, Jane.
Thanks.
Next item is item 6A. This is the Habitat for Humanity Rogers Road preliminary plat, site plan, and administrative modification from landscaping standards. It looks like Planning Manager Don Burchett is presenting.
Thank you, Chairman Poland. Dallas, if you could start the slideshow for me, please. Chairman Poland, members of the commission, I'm here tonight on behalf of Ava, who couldn't join us today. And I noticed that Commissioner Flake has her hand up. I don't know if we need to take that now.
Sure. Commissioner Flake?
yes. I thought I should let you know that I am acquainted with Pam Hora, who is presenting this evening. And I don't believe that will be an undue influence. We belong to the same faith community.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. So again, I'm here on behalf of Ava tonight, so I'll do my best to answer everything that the questions and everything that you have and try to give you a good understanding of this project. With me tonight is also Chris Huffer, one of our engineering administrators, who is here in case there's any questions about public works items. And then we also have the applicant and the consultants for the applicant Habitat for Humanity. So with that, Dallas, if we go to the first screen, please. Thank you. The property that you're looking at tonight is located on Rogers Road. The address is 42 and 50 East Rogers Road. It's comprised of 2 properties that are owned by Habitat for Humanity. The property is located along 3rd Avenue. As you're coming from the east and you pass Lashley, it would be on the south, the left-hand side of the road, and right before you get to Martin Street. And it's identified on the screen with the red box with the star in it. It's also bounded on the south by Rogers Road. 3rd Avenue is an arterial street in the city's comprehensive plan, and Rogers Road is identified as a collector street in our comprehensive plan. So the property does have 2 street frontages, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the site plan itself. The property is zoned mixed use corridor, and as you can see to the north across 3rd Avenue, we have the park, and that's the Kensington Park to the north. To the south, as you can see from the aerial, we have some outdoor storage uses that, for example, to the bottom right are some motorcycle outdoor storage for parts and things like that. And then we have additional outdoor storage areas along Rogers Road to the south as you head over towards Martin Street. And then on either side of the property, we do have some single family homes that are within that block that are existing and have been there since roughly the 1930s. And then as you get towards the end, towards Lashley, we have a future restaurant that has been going through our process. And then we have another commercial building at the end towards Martin Street. Next slide, please. As I noted, the zoning is mixed use corridor, and Envision Longmont has that same designation for the property. The zoning of mixed use corridor is a little unique in that it does not have a maximum density that is allowed in that district. It actually has a minimum zoning district or density that's required. And that density is typically 18 units to the acre. It's important to point out that this site, if this was not a affordable housing project, would have been required to have a minimum of 14 dwelling units on the property. The applicant has proposed 9, and that is allowed underneath the Land Development Code under section 1503-080B3D. As noted on the screen, they are exempt from that minimum density requirement through the Land Development Code, so that they have a variety of density that they could try to provide in affordable housing on properties that are zoned mixed use corridor. Next slide, please. So on the screen now, you have a copy of kind of a blow up of the site plan itself. To the north is towards the top of the screen. To the south is Rogers Road. And as you can see, the applicant is proposing 9 units on the property. They're arranged in 3 triplexes that are situated in a way that we have 3 units that face towards East Rogers Road, towards the bottom of the screen, which again is facing south, and take their access to their doors and things from East Rogers Road. The applicant has proposed to build a public alley that will provide alley access and allow for the garages to have alley access behind the units for the 3 that face Rogers Road. And then the 3 units, or the 2 buildings and the 6 units that face towards the north, towards 3rd Avenue, they too will take alley access for their garages, but their front doors are located off of the alley itself. And then the backs of their homes on the north are would front out towards 3rd Avenue and the arterial street. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about here in a minute with the administrative modification for the buffer. And so as you can see, the arrangement here is trying to make the best use of the property by situating the units in a way that front onto the streets as much as possible, using the alley access to prevent the garage domination of the street, and to provide access to the residents, and to also allow for some yards for them as well. So the administrative modification that is being requested deals specifically with those 6 units that are along the north, along 3rd Avenue. The Land Development Code has a requirement in it that when a buffer is required, any fencing that's proposed should be located between, or I should say behind, the landscaping that is required from the use that it's trying to buffer. And so in this case, the landscaping is required because of the proximity of the property to the arterial street. So there's a buffer required there of 10 feet that needs to be landscaped. And then the applicant is proposing a fence. And so the fence itself, according to code, would need to be behind or between the landscaping and the home to create more of a landscaped frontage along the 3rd Avenue frontage. The Land Development Code does allow for a modification underneath the modification standard. And this is different than a variance standard. The standard itself is different. The evaluation criteria that were included in your PZ packet are different than a variance. And it is spelled out in AVA staff report about staff's review of this, and that we believe that moving that fencing and allowing for that landscaping to be in the backyards of these 6 units and to help to kind of buffer the uses, the residential units from 3rd Avenue, we felt was actually a better use of this area. The applicant's presentation will go over and show you some of the visuals of the existing conditions along 3rd Avenue and how we also feel that that meets and fits in with the review criteria for talking about some of the existing conditions that are adjacent to the property. So I'll let the applicant present a little bit more on that here in a minute. Next slide, Dallas. So as required for a major development application, which the preliminary plat is, we did hold a neighborhood meeting. The neighborhood meeting was back in 2020. And then the application itself was submitted in 2021. And as you can see, during the neighborhood meetings, we did have 5 attendees that had raised some concerns with the increasing density in the neighborhood. They were also concerned with some of the property values and impacts to their homes, especially on those properties that were adjacent to this development site. And then when we did the notice of application in July and mailed that out to everybody, we did not receive any concerns at that time, but then we have received comments based on our notice for the public hearing. That letter is included in your packet and expresses the concern with the increased density and some of the compatibility with having multi-story units adjacent to existing single-family homes that are 1 story and that are adjacent to this property. We also included the neighborhood meeting minutes so that the commission could review those as well and ask any questions about that. Next slide. So Ava in the slide has provided a lot of information here, but I think the thing that I just want to try to end on here is that it's staff's opinion that based on the review criteria for the preliminary plat and for the administrative modifications, we do believe that the review criteria have been met. We've identified those findings within the staff report. Ava has pointed out a few of the things that we believe that it is in keeping with, for example, with Envision Longmont and with the zoning of the property. She also points out that the required surveys that were required from the environmental aspect, as well as looking to try to provide for compatibility with the neighborhood, looking at the impacts onto the St. Vrain School District, that from our standpoint, we believe that the standards have been met for approval of this. We do recommend approval of the project. That can be found in PZR 2022-4A. And that is the end of staff's presentation. And Chairman Poland, I'm happy to answer questions now or after the applicant's presentation, however you'd like to go.
Let's wait for after the applicant's presentation.
Thank you.
Let's move to the applicant's presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is David Emerson. I'm the Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity of the St. Vrain Valley. Commissioners, I very much appreciate and thank you for the time tonight to show you this site. It's a site we're very excited about. I think we do have a presentation, although I'm not seeing it on my screen. Okay, there we go. Again, we appreciate being able to take some time and talk to you about the Rogers Road site. If you can go to the next slide, please. Like I said, I'm the executive director. I've been in this position since 2006. We have Pam Hora is with us. She is our planning consultant. Gino Cornella with Rocky Ridge Civil Engineering is our civil engineer, and Steve Lane is here as our architect from Basis Architecture and Design. If you can go to the next slide. So very quickly, before I get into the technical details, or we get into the technical details, Habitat for Humanity's vision is a world where everyone has a decent, affordable place to live. We provide permanently affordable home ownership opportunities in Longmont and have been doing that since 1988. Next slide, please. Just to be clear on who qualifies for a Habitat home, there are 4 main criterias for individuals to qualify to purchase a Habitat home. One, that there is a clear housing need. That could be overcrowding, unsafe conditions, temporary, or someone's paying more than 30% of their income to housing. They must demonstrate an ability to repay an affordable mortgage. So when we sell the house, it's sold to the homeowner. They assume a mortgage that's no profit and affordable, and that gets repaid to Habitat that helps build more houses. And we are hitting those making between 35 to 70,000 a year approximately. So your basic service providers in the community. They have to demonstrate a willingness to partner, so they help build the house and they take training classes to prepare them for home ownership. We have never had a foreclosure in the St. Vrain Valley. 85% of our homeowners since 1988 are still in their homes, and about a third have paid off their mortgage. And then finally, they have to be a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident. Next slide, please. So recently, Habitat for Humanity Colorado completed an impact study where they surveyed over 500 Habitat homeowners around the state of Colorado. And we just want to articulate that what we see is that homeownership is transformational. So not only does it stabilizes their finances, the family's finances, and provide a stable house, it has a variety of different impacts for that family. So 98% of homeowners indicated that their children were either stable or had positive outcomes since moving to their house on education. 91% indicated a improved mental health, and over $800,000 is estimated as savings on government programs. So about half the government programs, assistance programs that were being used before they moved into a Habitat house than after. So a lot of different impacts than just the housing. Go to the next slide. One of the things we like to make sure our supporters know is it's very important that our houses blend to match the neighborhood. These are all examples of houses that we have built in Longmont, from single family detached to multifamily, condominium ownership, townhome ownership. So we've built in over 26 different area neighborhoods, and it's really, really important to us that when someone drives by our homes, they look no different than market rate housing. And so in this particular case, we're obviously looking to do the same thing, is make sure it's something that if it stands out because it looks good. Next slide, please. And these are just some quotes from some individuals in regards to our commitment to quality. We are always looking at investing in quality in terms of energy efficiency to make sure that not only are our homes affordable to buy, but they're affordable to own. So we spend a lot of time on energy efficiency right now. All our homes are going forward are 100% electric. And so we want to make sure that when a Habitat homeowner moves into their home, it's a home that is of the highest quality. Next slide, please. And so that's just a little bit about Habitat, and I can answer more questions if there are any, but for now, I'd like to hand it over to Pam Hora and have her talk about some of the specific technical aspects of what we're proposing.
Thanks, David, and good evening, commissioners. My name is Pam Hora. I'm a land use planner with Tetra Tech. This map is just a map of the site. As Dawn had talked about, the property is located between 3rd Avenue and East Rogers Road, to the east of Martin Street. As you can see, to the west and east of the site, there are a couple of single-family homes, and then to the north there is the park and some other single-family homes, and then to the south are some commercial businesses with the outdoor storage. So next slide, please, Dallas. In 2016, when the Envision Longmont Plan was approved, the land use under consideration tonight was identified as being in an area of change. And the land use, as well as the zoning at that time, became this mixed use corridor area. So that lavender color area on the map is the mixed use corridor area. As you can see, it extends from all along 3rd Avenue there, from about Emory down to an area just east of Lashley. So this new land use and zoning was established in order to encourage a mix of commercial, retail, employment, and medium and high density residential uses. The residential densities were encouraged to be up to the 18 units per acre, as Dawn talked about. Buildings could be up to 4 stories tall. And as Dawn talked about, the density, when it's affordable, it can be less than that 18 units, but there's also language in the code that could potentially allow density to be even greater than 18 units per acre. The other thing that having affordable housing does is allow you to actually go taller than 4 stories as well. So there's a lot of flexibility in that district. Next slide, please, Dallas. There it goes. In 2018, recognizing that this piece of property would allow for affordable housing to be built, Habitat for Humanity acquired the property in coordination with the City of Longmont's Housing and Community Investment Division. So the city granted Habitat for Humanity an affordable housing fund loan so that they could purchase the lot at 42 East Rogers Road. And then after Habitat purchased that, the city donated to them 50 East Rogers Road. When we set out to come up with a development plan to be able to replat this property to accommodate new affordable homes through Habitat for Humanity, there were some factors that we needed to take into consideration. First of all, we needed to come up with a plan that would be consistent with the comprehensive plan and zoning, and yet still be compatible with the existing single-family homes that were to each side of this piece of property. We also knew that we had to work around the fact that we could not obtain access to this site off of 3rd Avenue because of the fact that that is an arterial. All of our access had to come off of East Rogers Road to the south. And even then we were limited because of the fact that East Rogers is a collector and we're not allowed to have individual lots take direct access from East Rogers Road. Next slide, please. So this is a copy of the preliminary plat for the site that we are proposing. We're proposing a total of 9 lots, which are accessed by the public alley that connects to East Rogers Road in 2 places. So those 2 orange arrows they're showing up on the map are the connection points of the public alley down to East Rogers Road. And then the looped alley goes up and around lots 7, 8, and 9 to provide access up to lots 1 through 6 that are on the north adjacent to 3rd Avenue. As with any infill site, we did have our challenges. And so we worked very closely with planning, public works, Longmont Power and Communication, as well as the fire department to be able to come up with a plan that would work well for Habitat as well as all the city departments. And I think we've come up with a good way to lay out this piece of property. Next slide, please. So this is a site plan for the property. It shows the building footprints for the homes that are proposed in the site. The plan is to have 3 triplex buildings. One of the buildings will sit on lots 1 through 3. The other building sits on lots 4 through 6. And then the last building is on lots 7 through 9. The 2 triplex buildings that are on the north of the site up adjacent to 3rd Avenue will have identical footprints. They're just a mirror image of each other. Each of the homes in these 2 buildings will be 2 stories tall. The homes that are on the end of the buildings will have 3 bedrooms, and then each of the center units in these buildings will have 4 bedrooms. The triplex building that's down on the south side, adjacent to East Rogers Road, is going to be a single-story building. And the reason for that is we wanted to be able to have some of the homes in the building so that they could be constructed as accessible units if any of the homeowners need that. 2 of the homes in this triplex will have 2 bedrooms, and then one of the homes will have 3 bedrooms. All 9 of the homes in this project will have a 2-car garage that will be accessed from that looped alley. And then we also incorporated some guest parking spots off of the alley. There's 2 of the spots over to the west side and another 2 over to the east side along the alley. Between the 2 triplex buildings that are up on the north side, there's a sidewalk that we put into a public access easement, and that's provided there so that the residents can be able to have access up to 3rd Avenue without needing to walk all the way around the block. Next slide, please. So these are some 3D color images of the triplex buildings that are proposed on the north side of the site. As you can see, Steve Lane, the project's architect, did a nice job of using color to be able to add some visual interest to the buildings and give each unit its own sense of identity and uniqueness. Next slide. This is a view of the triplex buildings that are on the south side adjacent to East Rogers Road. Again, Steve used color to be able to distinguish between the different units within the building. In this graphic, you can also see in the back the triplex building that is along 3rd Avenue. Keep in mind when you're looking at these images, these are just simply to show you an idea of what the architecture is going to look like. It's not reflective of what will actually be seen because you're not seeing any of the landscaping or the fencing that's proposed on the site. All of the homes that are proposed do meet the city's residential design standards. Next slide, please. As part of our site plan application, we're requesting an administrative modification. And the purpose of the modification is so that Habitat for Humanity can be able to enclose that 10-foot wide buffer area north of the townhomes with a 6-foot tall privacy fence. So doing this will help give those future homeowners an enclosed backyard, and then also anybody traveling along 3rd Avenue won't be able to see directly into those backyards and into those homes. Also, another benefit of that fence is it helps to provide a bit of a noise buffer for those homeowners because of the noise that's generated by the traffic from vehicles traveling along 3rd Avenue. Next slide. So these are the images that Dawn had mentioned that we would have to be able to show you kind of the existing situation. The image on the top just shows kind of the direction that you're looking on the 2 views down below. So as you can see, when you're driving along Third Avenue, both of those adjacent property owners already have 6-foot tall privacy fences that enclose their backyard. So having another 6-foot tall privacy fence along these Habitat for Humanity lots will be very much consistent with what's already out there along this block. So it makes sense for us to be able to have that fence located there. Next slide, please. The privacy fence that Habitat is proposing actually goes above and beyond, I think, because it's more decorative than just your standard 6-foot tall cedar fence. As you can see from this picture, the fence will be a combination of wood and metal to help enhance the aesthetics of the fence that you'll see as you drive along Third Avenue behind these homes. Next slide, please. We know that it's important as we go through this process with the preliminary plat and site plan entitlement process to come up with a plan that will be compatible within the existing neighborhood. And we also need to make sure that we're responsive to the neighbors. At the same time, we need to develop a plan that's going to be consistent with Envision Longmont and the Land Development Code. So back in November of 2020, we did have a neighborhood meeting via Zoom. All the neighbors within 1,000 feet of this site were invited. There were 5 people who logged in to be able to listen to the neighborhood meeting and listen to our presentation. One of those people did call in, and that was Mr. Mark Brown, who lives just directly to the west of the Habitat property. And when he called in, he expressed concerns about the density of the development. And he did share about having concerns about having a 2-story home next to his single-family home and how that would infringe on his privacy. And then in an email that he also just sent to Ava earlier this month, he reiterated that same concern, and he also asked to see landscaping plans to be able to help address his privacy concerns. Next slide, please. So Habitat has taken Mr. Brown's concerns into consideration and has worked on addressing those. Also, David Emerson has been in contact with Mr. Brown because Habitat really values and wants to be a good neighbor. What I have on this graphic is just a copy of our landscape plan that is laid on top of the aerial photo, so that it'll just help me kind of explain some of the steps we're taking to help address Mr. Brown's concerns. So first of all, Mr. Brown is concerned about the project being too dense. As we've talked about at the beginning of the presentation, per the zoning, Habitat has the legal right to propose at least 14 units and even more because of the fact that these are affordable units. However, out of respect for the neighbors and the neighborhood, we are just proposing a total of 9 units on this site. So it's less dense than the code allows. Also, when we laid out the buildings on the Habitat site, we intentionally oriented those buildings so that the side of the building that is shortest in length would be adjacent to the single family homes. So by doing this, when Mr. Brown takes a look toward the Habitat homes, the structures that he will see will look comparable in size to just a single family home. Also, when it comes to buffering and landscaping, Habitat is going above and beyond. Per the code, we're required to have a 10-foot wide landscape buffer between the Habitat homes and the single family homes. And Habitat's proposing a 15-foot wide buffer. So it's 5 feet wider than they needed to provide per the code. And then, as you can see on the plan, that's the landscape plan. So the circles on there are the trees and shrubs that are proposed within the landscape buffer. And then finally, when it comes to building height, Habitat's being very respectful of the neighbors. As we've talked about, based on the zoning, They could have had 4-story buildings on this piece of property. But what we're proposing is just 1 and 2-story triplex buildings. And while Mr. Brown has a concern about the fact that, it's a 2-story building next to his home, I think it's also important to recognize the fact that single-story and 2-story homes next to each other are common in neighborhoods throughout Longmont. That's not an unusual situation. So because of all these design considerations, it really is evident that Habitat has been a considerate neighbor and that they've been responsive to the concerns that Mr. Brown has had about this project. And that the project that we're proposing really is compatible within the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So just to wrap things up, it's important for Planning Commission to know that Habitat has appropriately addressed all of the required review criteria. The project is consistent with Envision Longmont and the Land Development Code. The design's compatible within the existing neighborhood. There will be no damage to the natural environment as a result of the project. By working with city staff, we found a way to integrate the project into the existing transportation and utility service systems. And the project will comply with building and fire codes. Next slide. So for these reasons, we would ask you approve the preliminary plat and site plan with the administrative modification for the landscape buffer as outlined in PZR 2022-4A, because Habitat for Humanity is complying with all of the review criteria. Next slide. We just want to, first of all, thank staff for working with us to come up with a great plan for developing this site to accommodate 9 permanently affordable, well-designed new homes for families here in our community. And we'd like to thank you, planning commissioners, for your time and consideration this evening, and we'd be happy to help answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Pam. This is a public hearing item, and unless anybody has any burning questions that they would like to ask right now, what I would like to do next is go ahead and open this up for public comment. Okay. The information is being displayed on the screen for those viewing from home. Please dial 1-888-788-0099. When prompted, enter the meeting ID 836-4821-8164. When we are ready to hear public comment, we will call on you to speak based on the last 3 digits of your phone number. Each speaker must state their name and address for the record, and they will be allowed 5 minutes to speak. Please remember to mute the live stream when you are called upon to speak. We will now take a 5-minute break to allow people to call in.
Chair and Commission, we're about 30 seconds out from the 5-minute mark. Currently, we have no callers. Once I see you all back online and we get to that 5-minute mark, I will drop the slide. All right, we are at the 5-minute mark. We did get a caller in that last second there. Looks like I think we might be missing Chair Poland. Yes, it looks like he got kicked out of the meeting there. So give me just a second while I try and chat with him to get him back in. His computer had a quick reboot there, so he will be back in just a moment. He's in the lobby, just waiting to see a mic on him. Hey, Chairman Poland, can you hear us? We can see you, but not hearing you right now. Still can't hear you. If you're on a phone, let me think here. There should be an option. Well, no, I'm not even seeing a mic option on your name here. No, unfortunately can't hear you. If you have like the bar at either the top or the bottom of your screen, it should give you an option for microphones. Right now, I'm not even seeing one available based on my side. I don't know if that's the case on yours. If it doesn't work, there should be an option to call in as well. Okay, I just saw we got the connected audio. Want to unmute for me?
There we go. Sorry about that.
Hey, there we go. No problem. So while that was going on, we did get one caller in if you are ready to go.
Okay. Caller, please state your name and address for the record, and then you have 5 minutes to comment.
Sure thing. So caller with the last 3 digits 396, caller 396, please make sure your live stream is muted and hit *6 on your device to unmute. Hey there, caller 396. I can see you're unmuted. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Let me mute my computer. Okay. So am I able to ask questions about something that you did not just cover?
No, this is for the items that, this is for the item regarding the Habitat for Humanity Rogers Road preliminary plat. You can comment. We will not be taking questions though from the public, but you're allowed to comment.
Okay. Well, where or when can I ask questions about something that I'm concerned about?
After this item, we will have another public invited to be heard at the after this item, and at that point, you can go ahead and address and state comments on items that are not covered specifically in this particular meeting. So anything outside of the Habitat for Humanity Rogers Road plan.
Okay. Well, then I guess I'll call back in a few.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, and that is our only caller.
Okay, I will then go ahead and close the public invited to be heard and open this up for comments or questions from the commission. And we have I'm trying to see who that is. We have two, Commissioner Kolar.
Yeah, my question was probably for Pam or the applicant. With the landscape buffer that's going to be developed, who's going to be responsible for maintaining that? Is that the homeowner that's closest to it, or is there like an association?
Yeah, all the landscaping is on the individual lots, and so the owner of the lot will be responsible for maintaining the landscaping.
Okay, so the buffers that are on the western and eastern edges, those are the owners of each side of those. Okay.
Yes, yeah. So that's lots 1 and 6 that have the landscaping on them. So those lot owners will be responsible for maintaining that.
And they'll have irrigation established and all that already?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Height.
Thank you. Lost my cursor for a moment, but now I'm unmuted. I'm trying to confirm exactly why is the 10-foot buffer, because I look at this as multifamily. Maybe Don, that's for you. Maybe Pam, you can answer.
The 10-foot buffer along the 3rd Avenue.
Yep.
Because of the fact, I had to pull the code to make sure, but I think that one is based on the building setback. Don, do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get the exact.
It does say
citation
exactly
to it.
that. The buffer type is category A and the minimum width is the building setback, which to me, that's the building setback is 10 feet.
Yes.
So you're actually 20 feet setback as is with your design?
No, the setback and the buffer are the same. So it's 10 feet total. So that's what we're required to have. So
Okay.
it's not both. Yeah.
Okay. And then to go further down this line, because I'm looking at the administrative modification standards, you were explaining that Mr. Brown's concerns and other neighbors' concerns are making you squeeze in a little tight. You're not expanding out to the east and west boundaries as far as you possibly could. Again, your setback would have been 10 feet there and you're going to a 15-foot setback. Is that correct?
Right, we have 15 feet on each side, right, adjacent to the single family homes on either side, correct?
But you could go to 10 feet?
We could, but we didn't need the additional width. We could fit the houses within the space. Where we were more constrained was north-south.
I got you, but when I was looking at your plan and I was looking at ways that possibly you could, get around your problem with needing this administrative modification because of the buffer setback from Third Avenue, I thought possibly you could go wider, bring your footprint a little back to the south, and possibly get around that issue. But what I think I heard you say was, nah, you didn't do that because you're actually being more considerate of the neighbors, which I find to be somewhat of a unique design trick, which meets the standard to grant this administrative modification. So I appreciate that. And again, two, with respect to density, you've said this 4 times, I'm just going to say it as well. You could have gone 4 stories, you've gone 1 story and 2 stories, which is not uncommon in the area, though possibly uncommon in this neighborhood, which appears to have 1-story buildings on either side. Is that correct?
Correct. And
I was looking at the width of those lots to the east and to the west, and they look to be approximately half the size of the lots, the 2 lots that you are combining. Is that correct?
Yes.
It
Yeah.
is. Okay. Okay. So I like the design uniqueness, which is one of the qualifications about which we can grant you this administrative modification. Last question. The Jim Morrison garage, was that part of what you had to take down?
I believe that's on the adjacent property and is still up, I think.
Oh, that's still there. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Saunders?
Well, thank you for the presentations. I like this project. I like this partnership. I like the creative way of working with the lots in the alley and the driveway and the accessibility and the way Ava put it together. And I was reading through the definitions and criteria, and it was all going really well until I got to the landscape modification request. I have some struggles with that, and so maybe I can get some clarification and overcome those hurdles. If Pam or David, can you tell me why in the documents we got from Ava that you all, I guess, desire for the property not to have an HOA? Is that correct? And can you tell me why?
Sure, Commissioner Saunders, I can address that. So these are townhome ownership. So there is a very simple legal instrument that's used in that case, a third-party wall agreement. It is our observation, and this would be true of both market rate and affordable, not just affordable, but it is very difficult to get professional management and of an HOA when it is only a 9-unit subdivision. There are little to no agencies that we're aware of that would service and do professional management with small subdivisions like that. So what we're seeking to do here is create lines of responsibility that are very, very obvious. When you have an HOA, you tend to need at least 1, if not 3 officers that have to run in an HOA. There's a governance structure in an HOA that's required in order to make that work. And it's our observation that in smaller subdivisions, a townhome ownership style simply works better. We're very appreciative that the city worked with us on the public alley, oftentimes private streets. That's where anytime you get a common element, it means you have to have an organization, an HOA. someone's got to be an officer of that HOA to write checks. And so therefore there needs to be voting for that officer. So there's not difficult things, but smaller things that you have to have someone serve in that governance structure. And I think that's easier, obviously, market rate or otherwise, when you have, 50 or 100 units. So that was our thought process, at least.
And that sort of, thank you for that answer. That sort of aligns
Yeah.
with what my thinking was too, as far as this property. And so my expectations of the landscape plan had a certain standard for that. And I don't feel that these landscape plans are meeting that for the low maintenance, low cost for the homeowners to be responsible, especially for every lot except lot 2 and 3. It seems like all the other lots are carrying an extra burden for water, the watering and replacement costs and maintenance costs. And so I have a couple other questions, but on that thread, I'm wondering, and this question might be for Don, what happens if these landscape buffers become sticks and stones, like past that initial phase? For the buffer on 3rd and the buffer for the properties next door?
Commissioner Saunders, members of the commission, this is something that I think is a common problem with some of our landscaping requirements in general, is that even if there's an HOA, the enforcement end of the site plan requirements ultimately falls back on the city through complaints, typically, to force the landscaping to be reinstalled and to be brought back up to code. And we react to that on a complaint basis. And so when we are notified that there's an issue, we try to reach out to the HOA or to the business or, the owner, depending on the type of development application that it is, and inform them that, they are not in conformance. And then ultimately it becomes really an enforcement issue at that point. We would have to, if there's not the willingness to comply, then, we could look at trying to do some kind of a lien and force the work that we would have to pay to get done, and then try to get reimbursed through taxes, which we've done in one case since I've been here. But, typically it would be a notice of violation, giving a person a certain amount of time to correct the violation, and then expecting them to make the improvement. If they don't, then that takes it to the next level, which would be enforcement through our prosecuting attorney, who would have to make a determination of whether or not to prosecute, and to go to the judge to request that we have help in getting that taken care of. And I can tell you that that is something that I've never seen happen. So, and again, that's not with an affordable project. That's not with a market rate. That is with every development, whether it be a King Soopers development, whether it be a large apartment home complex, whether it be a large major employer in the city of Longmont. We just don't, we do our best to try to gain compliance from them in an amicable way.
Excellent. Good. Okay. That's what I was hoping to hear. And then one more question for you, Don. Is this the final approved plant list, the actual plants that are going to be going in? That's okay.
That is my understanding based on my rundown of this with Ava. Pam, I think, could confirm that this is the site plan that is subject to being signed off and approved. And if so, then this plant list is the final plant list currently.
Okay. And thank you, Don. And that's a great segue to Pam. So Pam, when is these back lots? Because that modification is really just about the ones on 3rd, right? And that 10-foot buffer. And so wouldn't they have landscape already in the backyards. And so isn't it sort of double dipping where the backyards are just acting as buffer? Like, well, I think it's a creative solution. I have some issues with the planting plan, but I'm just wondering, would they have already had landscaping in their backyards on the south side of the fence?
The requirement to provide the landscaping is because of the buffer requirement. There's not a city requirement for rear yard landscaping, like to put landscaping in somebody's backyard. Is that what you're asking?
Well, because it sounds like, well, we're putting the landscape in the backyard to satisfy the landscape buffer along Third, but I'm guessing the landscaping would have already been there, first of all, in the backyard.
I mean, the way that the code is written, the buffer is measured from the structure to the property line. So that 10-foot area, it functions as both a backyard and as a buffer. And it's the buffer requirement that requires landscaping. The code doesn't have a requirement that we have to provide any landscaping in a backyard.
So if you didn't have, if you had to go ahead and do the buffer, you would take the landscaping out of the backyards and put it on the other side of the fence.
If we can't, the landscaping's going there no matter what. What we're requesting is to be able to put a fence basically along the property line so that we can enclose the backyards. So what we're requesting has really nothing to do with the landscaping. It's about, can we put the fence there?
Right. And I feel that it goes along with the design continuity of that space, and the hardscaping can be a part of the landscape buffer. Definitely. So you wouldn't have had a fence if you didn't need the buffer. I'm just trying to find out why we even need this modification, because it feels like because I have some struggles with it, and even needing it, I guess. If all these elements were already going to be in there.
So the standard itself is really trying to do, it's a general standard. It applies for any type of development, whether it be single family, multifamily, townhome, commercial, industrial. The standard itself says if you're required to have a buffer based on the type of use you're adjacent to, like a street, for example, an arterial street, and then the type of residential or type of development that you're doing, the code specifies the width and the type of buffer that's required. The fencing is not a requirement for this development. The applicant is asking to install a fence, and their proposed location is on the property line, and that is between the landscaping that's part of the buffer and the street to the north. So code says it's not supposed to be on the inside of the fence, it's supposed to be on the outside.
Yes.
And so again, the request here under the modification, because this is a non-numeric standard, the administrative modification allows for this deviation as long as the commission finds that it's, as Commissioner Hyde was talking about, an alternative that, there's benefit, or, there's in the criteria, and I don't have those right at the tip of my tongue, but
you don't have it right.
that's the specific section then that we're looking at. And so if this was, for example, a larger development, maybe a single family project or a large townhome project, and there was an HOA, often this buffer would have been put into an outlot and would have been owned and maintained by that HOA. But in this case, because of trying to make sure that everybody understands what their maintenance responsibilities are, they're included within the yard. They would like the fence inside the yard. And I can say from what we have seen in other developments where we have fences that basically block access or can restrict access to improvements on the other side, those often get overlooked and neglected more than if they're in the backyard. And in this area, we believe this is a good alternative.
Right, and I applaud the efforts for making that work for this property. So my problem is, as a commissioner looking through the criteria, I do not think that it meets one part of the criteria if the landscaping is part of that buffer, because the way that the plan reads, so it's the administrative modification request. And my specific problem is with D of part 2 under A, the requested administrative modification for that subsection 2, and then all the way to D, represents a creative and quality design without detriment to surrounding properties or neighborhoods, natural environment, or to the city's ability to provide services and maintain public facilities. Looking at this landscape plan, there are some problems that I'm having being on the north side of this property and on the south side of the fence. So if it's just the fence, I don't have a problem with that, except for that the buffer has to have a combination of fence and landscaping. The problem I'm seeing with the landscaping, some of the sizes are inappropriate. Like the pinyon pines are like half the size that they're going to be, and it's an evergreen. So I have concerns about shading on that side of the sidewalk, which it's not an intersection, so it's probably okay. And they're full sun plants, and the irrigated turf will not see any sun, especially if it's under trees. So I have concerns about the maintenance of it and homeowners overwatering it and the water getting to the sidewalk and then it being shaded by the 2 stories of buildings and the trees, which you can see at the cannery, which is just down the street, and they have 2 trees on the south side with the same setback. Okay, so maybe we can move around with that, maybe remove the trees. A bigger problem that I have with the sitting of the plants are in that drainage easement with the that concrete pan. 1, 2, 3, 5 trees are planted on it or in it. So I'm not sure that's going to meet a drainage requirement, having them planted in that concrete pan, because it will obviously not do its drainage job. And or near it, it will also uplift it. And then it starts to become this problem of maintenance. And I feel for these homeowners incurring this huge cost and going back to the HOA, which is not part of what we're supposed to look at as far as the criteria. My problem is with the accuracy of the plan, and I don't feel that it meets that representing the quality design component as I'm looking at it right now, unfortunately, because I like this property and this project, but I don't feel that it meets that modification, and I have concerns about it being put in like this. So I don't know how to fix it. And the only thing I could come with is maybe take out the trees, but then you lose the attenuation buffer for the homeowners with the sound. But you can't put it in that drainage pan and the shadiness of it. I don't feel that it rises to the approval criteria for me for the landscape modification, unfortunately. I think the fence, yeah, we can find a way to do that, but otherwise it doesn't meet the criteria for the modification. I see there's other hands raised, so maybe I can let that sit for a minute.
Well, Commissioner Saunders, do you have a question then regarding that layout to the applicant?
Yeah, I don't know how it can, because it's tricky, and I know that everybody's been working really hard to satisfy all these requirements. I can't approve it, seeing it with the trees in the drain pan and being part of that landscape buffer. So I don't know how, because I'm not in it as much as you guys are, so I don't know how to satisfy a landscape buffer without trees, especially since, a big part of it is to buffer the sound from the street to the homeowners. But at the same time, horticulturally, there's some challenges here for this landscape plan to go in. So I don't feel it rises to the standard that I would expect for homeowners to be able to maintain it on their own. But again, that goes off to an area that's not part of the criteria. So I don't have a solution. I'm sorry. I wish I did. Maybe someone will come up with one in this conversation.
Well, I mean, I think the landscaping that's proposed on here is the landscaping that the code requires as far as the types and numbers of trees and shrubs. So, I mean, based on the feedback that you're providing, we could potentially try to work on a different plan and have the landscape architect look at different trees or shrubs or that sort of thing to address some of your concerns related to making sure that we make modifications to the landscaping to address the long-term maintenance kind of concerns and shading and some of those things that you're bringing up that are specific to the plants.
Yeah, and where they're sitting, because they're sitting in the drain pan. It's a concrete drain pan, so it's not going to drain if there's a tree planted right in the middle of it, which is pretty outstanding to see. And I like what you're saying, but I just want to draw your attention to the alternative buffer requirements, where the director may approve an administrative modification under subsection 1502080B for alternative buffer requirements based on the consideration of the scope and scale of the proposed development and mix of uses, the proposed building placement design, the quality of the proposed landscape design, and decorative screen wall as applicable, the width of the buffer, and site perimeter conditions. In there, I don't see anything where it says 1 tree per 750 square feet. So it seems like that may be where the glitch is, where you're trying to put it in those 1 tree, 7 shrubs per square footage of the volume of that 2,000 square feet. And maybe it's just, if it's just the fence, maybe the director can approve an administrative modification under subsection for just the fence. And then you guys take the plants, because I can't say yes to these plants as I'm looking at it. So that's just me though. So I mean, and maybe that's more for John, and maybe it can be rolled into it that way. I don't really know.
So because this application is a part of a major development application, the Planning Commission has purview on whether or not to grant the modification or not. My recommendation, unless we're going to continue with this discussion, would be to make a motion that would represent what you believe either is a fair way to address the issue as a condition, or deny it and see if you have 4 other votes in favor of it, or look for something else. The applicant could also at this point withdraw the request for the modification, and then we would deal with that if and when they ever come in for a fence permit, and then it would be at the director's discretion. So that's kind of where we're at this point. I really don't know what else to add. Looks like there's others with their hands up. So that's
Can I ask just one quick follow-up? Can we take that modification out and just approve the other components? Oh shoot, I forgot what they were.
The commission can make any motion and vote to do whatever you would like. If
The
you
plat
want to
and the
approve
site
the
plan.
plat,
Okay.
the
Thank you.
site
I think
plan,
and the modification. Yeah, I think let's see where this is going. Thank you, John.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Height.
Who did you call?
Commissioner Height.
I heard Flay. My apologies. Janelle, you were muted, but you weren't.
I would just as soon go now, because what my question was, can we see this map that we're talking about?
Well, I'm going to follow up anyhow, because I'm looking at the landscape plan, I think. Page 18 of 20 looks to me in our packet. It's item number 6.
I couldn't
If you're
seem to
saying-
pull it up just now, so if it's possible.
Well, you're in and out for me. Commissioner Foot, now you're unmuted. In any
Right.
event, I'll
So
follow
if
up
we
with
could
my
see the
question.
map that
Okay.
to which,
I'll let you go. I'll stay muted.
if we could see the map to which Commissioner Saunders is referring, that would be helpful. And I do have a question. So we're allowing the landscaping that otherwise would be visible to the public behind a solid fence that's 6 feet tall because it's required. What if, is there a way the commission can say, we will simply accommodate it by not requiring that 10-foot landscaping? Is that the way out of this? Don, can we do stuff like that?
So off the cuff, I would say you could not waive the landscaping requirement. Again, the fence is the issue here, the location of it. The fence is not required by code to be there.
Okay.
The applicant is choosing to install a fence and asking to put it between the landscaping and the right of way. So that's the issue, is the fence. I think you need to look at the landscaping and understand the request for why the fence in the place that they're proposing it either does or does not make sense with the criteria. But I just want to make sure everybody understands the request is based on the request for the fence.
Okay, so if I were looking at it, I would say they have to have the fence. It's against an arterial. And it maintains the sight line for the whole entire block that's already there. To me, that makes sense to have that. So we're discussing a drain pan somewhere, and I'd like to see the landscape plan so I can see what that is. But I have a couple other questions that are a little different from that. We talked about the pedestrian access through that said fence. And how is the access going to be secured? Is there a gate? Will the gate have a key? Will it be locked from the inside? What are we doing? And I think maybe this is a question for Pam.
I think at this point we have the fence shown, so it would just enclose the backyard, so it would be open, that pedestrian connection out to the street. I don't know that anything has been planned at this point as far as a gate or anything like that. I know Habitat for Humanity did have some concerns about having it just be open for anybody to be able to come and go from there, but we did not propose any kind of a gate to close it off. So at this point, it's open.
I have noticed, just a comment, in other neighborhoods, they bring that kind of a fence. They do a perpendicular attachment and bring it down the length of sidewalk enough that people can't see into the backyards of the adjacent buildings, and that creates sort of a security channel there. The next question I have is in regards to the lighting on the site. One of the things that can happen with new builds is that there's going to be a light, of course, by the entrance, and then people are going to want the lights over the garage. And my concern always is that when these lights go in there, the modified colonial version of a candle kind of a thing goes in, which spreads the light all over the place. And with the adjacent neighbor being concerned about having an invasion of his property, that's one of the big concerns. Will you put in lights that will do adequate lighting, but not then also share the light beyond the lot line, which I understand is a requirement, that lights come to zero at the lot line? And how do you make sure that going forth, the residents of the new builds realize that they are not allowed to put in spotlights to light up the world? So those are my concerns on that part of it. And I guess you were in the process of pulling up the landscape plan, so we can take a look at that.
Alice, if I
Thank
could
you.
just jump in, it was page 18 of that.
Gotcha.
And if I could find it, I would do that.
Yes, page
If-
18 of the applicant presentation, correct?
I don't know if
No,
it's,
Section 6 or attachment 6 of our meeting packet.
I do not have access to the packet. I just have the applicant presentation and the staff presentation. If it's on one of those two, I can pull it up for you guys.
I have a version of it in our presentation.
Sure. I think I found it. You can confirm if this is it or not. Give me just a second. Does this look correct? Or is
Yeah.
there a different one? Okay, great.
That shows it, or on.
No, that's not showing the plants because it's right underneath that 10-foot wide landscape buffer. So,
Slide 19, I think might.
oh, thank you, Pam.
And I know that you're concerned about those trees being in the concrete pan, and actually they're not. It looks like it there, but they're not. They're planted off to the side. I can see what you're saying as far as they grow, they could, the vegetation grow into that area where the concrete pan is, but I know they're not physically planted right in the pan.
and this is Dave Emerson. If I may just interject, one thing to keep in mind is what is different from a market rate development is, keep in mind, Habitat has a lengthy period in which our homeowners are being educated on the community in which they're going to live. So in a market rate community, if this was built, person would have a house sold, they'd move in. There's really no education period with the developer or the builder. So if we put it, I'm reacting to the comments about, you put in these lights and being sensitive to floodlights and things like that. We have the benefit of being able to specifically educate those homeowners as we're building the houses. They have to put in sweat equity. Part of that sweat equity is not just building the houses, but learning about the neighborhood in which they're going to be buying a house. So while that does not guarantee a homeowner from making a poor decision, I think it raises the odds that they will be much more educated and sensitive to some of the issues that are idiosyncratic with that specific site, different from a traditional market rate product.
And the lights that we're proposing on these homes are included on the architecture sheets that are part of the site plan, that we show some light sconces that would be on the side that directly, make sure the light stays down and isn't shining out onto other properties. So.
Thank you.
Commissioner Height.
A lot of my ground has been covered, but Ms. Hoare, I wanted to confirm too, in response to Commissioner Saunders' observations, I just wanted to clarify the center point of those trees is somewhat of an approximation, or is you just said that's not exactly where the trees
Well,
are?
I'm looking at a copy of the landscape plan, and I can see it better on my screen than what you're seeing in your packets probably, and I can see where they're planted. It's not in the concrete pan. So I mean, they couldn't be planted in the concrete pan. They're shown off to the sides, but
Gotcha.
the way that they're drawn.
And then just to stay with you, Pam, I think the observation Ms. Saunders was, or Commissioner Saunders was making was that the trees creating a north face snow ice patch on the 3rd Avenue sidewalk right of way, and I'll defer to Commissioner Saunders in a second. Do you find that to be a problem? What's your opinion of that observation?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I'm just gonna look and see what the tree species are that are, I see that it looks like one pinyon pine, I think. So several of them are deciduous trees. And so we could look at switching out. I know the reason specifically why the evergreen trees were on there is because there's a city requirement that 25% of the trees on there have to be the coniferous trees. And that's what's kind of driving what's being proposed. But on this particular site, perhaps there's a way to modify that to not have those on the north side there where it could cause that problem on the sidewalk, and swap out for a deciduous tree to address that particular concern with the landscaping there.
And the other comment I had, Commissioner Flagg hit, which was that this pedestrian walkway, is it public? It's not meant to be public, is it?
It is in a public access easement.
It is.
Yes, so that
Okay.
any of these homeowners could be able to use that to be able to walk up to Third Avenue, and they don't have to go all the way around the block to be able to get to Third Avenue.
Well, I'm more interested in me being able to walk into that alleyway off of Third Avenue. Is that the intent? That it is truly public?
Yeah, I mean, it is truly public.
Okay.
It would be legal for you to do that, but
So you wouldn't want to gate it?
no.
All right. And then Dave, Mr. Emerson, the only other comment, with a 3-unit triplex, not only a common law agreement, but you're going to have a roof agreement too, right?
Right.
I mean, there are some common elements that you can't get around with this type of ownership regardless. I was just going to point that out. Why?
Yeah,
I don't know,
that's
but I
right.
did. Okay.
No, that's right. And that's covered in the legal agreement, the third party wall agreement. That's common with townhomes. Again, what we're doing, a couple things to, again, keep in mind. That period of time as we're building the homes, that education period, is really a time we're using to prepare homeowners for the product that they're going into. The second is, remember that Habitat is not just the builder, we're the lender. We are ensuring that the mortgage is at 27% of their income. And because these are permanently affordable, the property taxes are going up in a more graduated, constrained way, so that doesn't get out of whack. And that's important not only for the mortgage, but it's important for those other ownership costs that every homeowner has. So again, that does not guarantee 100% success, but that educational component and the fact that we control the mortgage and the cost for their housing puts our homeowners in an excellent position. We have done condo ownership, both where it was pretty much 100% Habitat and part of a condo situation where that association is covering those costs. But again, that association is still the homeowners. So no matter how you govern those things, it will come back to the relationship of those homeowners and how they work together, whether it be through a condo vehicle, an HOA vehicle, or a third-party wall vehicle. So it's really critical, and I think we do a really good job of educating those homeowners that they really need to be working together when it comes to things like the roof and so forth. So.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Lukacs.
Thank you, Chairman Pollan. Thought I would chime in and with some clarifying questions on the fence. It looks like currently there is a fence there. It's not a 6-foot fence, and all the other neighbors around have a fence. Have they all applied for an administrative modification, or how come now there is a fence? and, in the future, we require a modification for the development.
Their existing fences would not need any kind of variance or modification.
Because of
So,
the height.
because they've existed, they were legally allowed previously to the land development code changes that occurred in 2018-19 when we adopted the most recent version of the land development code. So this is a new standard.
I got you. So it's a new code. And then, so the new fence, would it be in alignment with the neighboring fences with a line? Is that the property line where it's currently is and contiguous with the neighboring fences? Would we kind of maintain the status quo of where the fence is now?
Yeah, so this fence would be located in the same alignment as those neighboring fences, yes, because they have it sitting on their property line outside of the right of way there. So this one would be in the same location.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Flake.
I did not have my hand up.
Well, you did a few minutes ago, sorry.
Can I
At
change?
least it showed. Sorry. Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm going to try and see if I can resolve this. So I agree that, landscape plans, they get you close, but still for the accuracy of this commission, I'm still struggling with accepting it based on the size and the plant list that is going to be put in on the north side of these 2-foot buildings, or sorry, 2-story buildings. I just don't think that they are appropriate. And that's the only thing that I can look at for this landscape part because it's part of the design criteria. So my suggestion, and I think we might be ready since I've seen hands go down, is let me ask this of Don real quick, if you don't mind, planning manager. If we just approve the modification for the fence only, if I can make that amendment to that, then everything can still go about it. We're just not approving the landscape plan for that northern buffer. So I just don't see it reaches the criteria, but the landscape portion, aside from, I think the fence is fine. I think it meets that continuous design. I think it adds that sound buffer. I think that based on the modification, the indirector can just approve just the hardscape for the fence to be that buffer. I'm all for that. I'm just not for that landscape strip. Is that appropriate?
So you have the ability to apply a condition to your approval. You would need to decide what the condition is.
Yeah.
If the condition is that you want the applicants to reduce the amount of planting in that area, if you want them to look at alternative species and types that would better work on the north side of the house and in a more narrow area, you could apply that as a condition of approval for the modification for the location of the fence.
But if it's not in our buffer, it shouldn't matter, right? Because it's not going to be considered part of Longmont's criteria for the landscape buffer for third, and just the fences, then they can do what they want through, because it's their private property, they can do what they feel is necessary and goes through development review. Because I don't want to harp on this for them, but I can't, go ahead, sorry.
So I'm really having a hard time following you. So I mean no disrespect in that, but I'm really having a hard time understanding the concern. So again, the code requires them to have a 10-foot buffer that has a certain number of trees and shrubs in it by code. The code does not specifically say the types of plants or trees, other than we have a list of approved materials for trees in the city. and it requires a certain percentage of those trees to be coniferous species. So the fence itself, the only thing that we're looking at on this modification is the location of the fence. If you have concerns with the types of species and you believe that those should not be used, if you think there should be other things looked at in that buffer or removed, you could make that as a condition. You would just need to adopt the B resolution, which is a conditional approval, versus the A. And you would need to spell out what those conditions of approval would be. And then I would also recommend that you make a finding for the record as to why you believe what you are requesting as the condition,
Right.
how that meets the standards for approval, so that that's entered into the record in case this is appealed to City Council.
So thank you. And so my problem is that as a private owner, they should be able to choose whatever plants, whether or not I think they're fine or not. But because it's part of the landscape buffer requirement for the city of Longmont, which it would normally be on the outside of the fence, where we would see it and we would access it as a community, it's now on the inside. And so now it seems like it crosses over into a different space. And I don't want to be responsible for that. I think the fence in that landscape modification is fine, but I'm not as comfortable of owning that landscaping part, the softscape part of it, when I don't feel that it meets the quality and standards of the landscape buffer requirement. So all I'm saying is if it's fine to just accept it and amend it without the plants, I mean, and that's just me. So I'm just brass tacks in it, and it doesn't matter because, one vote is one vote. So it seems like everybody else is on board with it.
So Commissioner Saunders, you keep saying like our buffer or the city's buffer. It's not, just to be clear, the buffer is a requirement of code, but it's not owned by the city. It's not
correct. Yeah, and I don't mean to say that we own it, but we're approving it, right? We're approving it as far as a modification to go in with this city code, and then why does it matter? So and maybe maybe I'm just not understanding. Well, I don't want to hold this whole thing up based on this. I do think overall it's a great project. I'm stuck on it. It's just not meeting the standards that I would think it would with the modification. So I'm just gonna end it there. Thank you for your patience.
Commissioner Flake.
Don, I have a question for you. I understand there is someone on staff who does review landscape plans. And did that happen in this situation?
So due to budget cuts, we have no longer have a licensed landscape architect able to review those for us.
Okay, but basically what has been planned there, and I guess Pam, you can answer this better than anyone. So you've met the requirements that would be for that 10-foot strip, regardless of the fence.
Correct.
And you've managed all the plants and whatever that's in there. And so basically it's not the landscaping we're really moving on here. It is the location of the fence.
Correct.
And so if we are fine with the location and existence of that fence, then we don't need to amend this. We simply, if we approve of it, then we move to approve. That's my understanding. Would that be a correct statement?
That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Okay, Don, I have a question, just to kind of give me a little bit of historical information. Was there anything ever on these lots before? Because right now it looks like it's just a lot of dirt.
So I can't speak to the lot along the west. The one that, excuse me, is on the east, that was actually owned by the city, and it was a commercial type of building that we used to have a clothing drop-off site. Excuse me. Sorry, I've been talking too much. And so I can't remember if that was our center that was in there previously. It's been a long time.
It was ours.
Okay. And it was a clothing drop off. And I think almost like, you would go in and you could get clothing. I think they had some other services in there too, but it was a community facility. And then after the Our Center ended up moving into their most current building across from Georgia Boys and remodeling all of that, closing and selling their building to Georgia Boys that was on the north side of 3rd. The city went in and we shut down, as I recall, or didn't continue with the lease of that building. And then ultimately we demoed that. It was getting pretty blighted in that area. And that was part of the reason why we tried to clean that up and remove some of the old structures that were out there.
And can you give any kind of brief history of what the zoning was in that area before this? Because it sounds like in 2018, that's when we went ahead and made it mixed use corridor. Do you know what it was before that? I'm just trying to get a background of, it seems like a kind of an odd neighborhood. You have those single family houses, yet when we went ahead and zoned it, it's requiring 18 units per acre. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out what was it before, what, is this a drastic change or that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I can try to see if I can find a map real quick while we're talking, but I don't remember for sure. Let me look. And then also Mr. Huffer had said that there was a house that was on the other lot that was demoed. And so Pam and Dave, I think that's correct. I think.
Yes, that's correct.
And I know on the Envision Longmont plan, this was identified as an area of change. I think because of a lot of the, like you mentioned, like that when the Our Center quit using that building and that building is maybe a little bit blighted and it was removed. And so just a lot of changes going on. And I think it seems like the thought was that this area is undergoing some redevelopment and change. And so the plan was to see that as the land started to redevelop, that it would begin to have more density, is my understanding, just based on the review of the Envision Longmont plan.
And I have the zoning map from 2011. Let me just zoom in here real quick and I can answer your question, Chairman. So it was R2, so it was residential medium density before the zoning change and the update with the Envision Longmont code. So that would have allowed for some multifamily development on the property, as well as some single family. The commercial uses that would have been there previously, and in that those areas would have been non-conforming uses.
And then what are other uses in mixed use corridor outside of residential?
So it's probably one of our largest uses, medical, office, retail, daycare services. It's a broad category actually that really allows for a large variety of mixed of uses, including assembly uses like churches. Trying to think of some of the other ones, but in general, it is when you look at that, you'd probably think more of like our North Main, north of say Mountain View.
Okay.
Headed north.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to add my 2 cents in here. I really like this project. As I just want to confirm what could have gone in here. I think would have been harder for to be next to single family homes. I think it's a good project for that area. When looking at this issue with the landscaping and stuff, I believe that in the past, we've not really gone too much into trying to nitpick over what goes into certain areas. I think we take the landscaping as an overall effect. And from what I see from the landscaping plan here, that overall it meets the needs for this area. And so I don't have a issue with it. And as was pointed out, once these houses go in place and we have the fence up there, really what happens behind the fence happens behind the fence, and the city really doesn't have a say in it anyways. The fact that we just have certain trees going in there in the beginning, I'm not going to worry about nitpicking about what type of trees and whether or not we feel that they would be survivable or not. I'm going to trust that the applicant has done their research and is putting in suitable landscaping for the area. So next we have Commissioner Height.
Thank you. I'm going to take a full-on stab, folks. I want to move approval of PZR 20224A, which is finding that the project meets the applicable standards. I'm going to say for the record that I think it's clear that the applicant has identified that 1502055, the general review criteria, have been met for this project. That section 1502060.E. Preliminary plat review standards have also been met. And then I'm going to add in specifically that the standards for approval of administrative modification 1502080.E.7 with respect to the landscape buffer issues and where a fence can be located in the landscape buffer under section 1505040.F.1.C. Moving the fence to be contiguous with the right-of-way on 3rd Avenue is an appropriate alternative design presentation under 1502080. It meets the code and comp plan purposes and goals. It is a creative design and it doesn't impact the neighboring properties. So I find that the record is established and it meets the criterion for approval pursuant to the language as set forth in PZR 22020. Oh, geez, PZR 20224A. That's my motion.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to Commissioner Saunders, I'm wondering if we have a second for the motion. If not, I will go ahead. I'll go ahead and second the motion. And I guess we can continue on some discussion here. Commissioner Saunders.
So you jumped the gun on me a little bit, Chairman. Thank you. I was going to, and actually Commissioner Height jumped the gun on me too. So I was going to motion after I walked back some of the landscaping criteria, and I'm sorry to go down that path and maybe get myopic about it. That is my professional field, and we do have certain standards, and I am sorry to hear that there's not a professional at the city of Longmont. So I do think I probably took it to a little bit more of a place that was overbearing to the rest of the project, and I apologize for that. It just, seeing how this plays out and seeing the functionality of these plants, which, you know, planning manager Bruchette makes the great point that the only thing for species for landscape materials that they be compatible with local climate and intended purpose, and other trees and plants on the approved materials list are addressed in the city standards. And I believe all of these are on the city standards. I just have trouble with the location and the problem it's going to be on that area of north of the property on that public area with the sidewalk, but it by no means is a reason to have the whole project come to a standstill or be denied. So I don't want it to come off as that. And I really do want the homeowners to be able to, like you say, take that ownership and investment in the property. And I just don't know if this is at that level of where it's going to be this is success that I hope for. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I totally hope I'm wrong. So I appreciate the conversation and I appreciate the feedback and the patience for me on that. And so now I can't make the motion and I cannot second it, but I'm really happy that you guys are putting this project together. And I'm sorry to give you a hard time about it, but again, we all have those criteria and standards that we're trying to meet. And so I do wish everyone the best on this project. And with that, I will leave any other discussion to the rest of the esteemed commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Saunders. And this is the forum where we all can question and put our own comments and thoughts out. So it was appropriate for you to do that. So we have a motion, we have a second. If there's no other questions or comments, let's take a vote.
Chairman Poland,
4.
Commissioner Flagg,
4,
Commissioner Height,
Aye.
Commissioner Kohler,
Aye.
Commissioner Lukacs,
Aye.
Commissioner Saunders,
4.
Commissioner Teta.
Aye.
Chairman, that passes unanimously 7-0.
Thank you very much. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period. The appeal period begins Thursday, March 17th at 8 a.m. and it ends Wednesday, March 23rd at 5 p.m. Thank you to the applicant. And let's move on to the next item. Next item is public to be heard, final call. The information is being displayed on the screen for those viewing from home. Please dial 1-888-788-0099. When prompted, enter the meeting ID 836-4821-8164. When we are ready to hear public comment, we will call on you to speak based on the last 3 digits of your phone number. Each speaker must state their name and address for the record and will be allowed 5 minutes to speak. Please remember to mute the live stream when you are called upon to speak. We will now take a 5-minute break to allow people to call in.
Chair and Commission, we are about 30 seconds out from the 5-minute mark. Currently, no callers in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Give it a few more seconds just because I know we had that one person called in during the item.
Exactly. Yes. Yep. You let me know when you'd like me to drop it.
You can go ahead and drop it.
Sure
I will
thing.
go ahead and close the public invited to be heard.
It is closed.
Thank you very much. We'll move to the next item, item 8, which is items from the commission. And first of all, I would like to apologize for the little computer mishap I had earlier. And those things that sometimes is beyond your control. So hope it didn't cause too much of a disturbance. Anything else from any of the other members? Commissioner Lukacs.
Thank you, Chairman Pollan. Just like we have, sometimes opportunities to go to conferences and opportunities for the commissioners and staff for professional development and networking, I want to bring an item to everyone's attention, including the public that is watching this meeting tonight. There is happening in Colorado, there's going to be a state walking college program, and it's open to community advocates and also professionals from all sorts of walks of life that are interested in getting a deeper dive into livable communities. And that is something that America Walks, that's a national organization, is putting on yearly at the national level. And I've been a past fellow years ago, and I'm currently a mentor. I've been a mentor for the last couple of years for those fellows. And now through a partnership with AARP, they're bringing this specially to folks in Colorado. So there is this opportunity out there. If anyone is interested to, take a look at what this is, they could go on the America Walks page or the Colorado AARP page and find out more and apply. It can be competitive sometimes. So some of the years have been really competitive at the national level. And I'm really happy to see it here in Colorado.
Thank you. Anything else from the commissioners? Okay, Council Representative Rodriguez is not here today. Items from Planning Director Glenn Van Nimwegen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of things I wanted to go over. Number one, I think it was back in August, we talked about voting of whether we're going to be in person going forward, or are we going to try and return to the council chambers or stay virtual, I should say. And then you saw a survey go out by the clerk's office. So they are gathering data on that. I don't know that we need to really decide what our preference is at this point, but we're just kind of waiting on what they learned from surveying all the boards and commissions, and perhaps there's going to be some direction from that. So I just wanted to mention that. If you have any questions about that, the council is going back in person starting March 29th. That's what I wanted to give you a little bit of background on, number one. Number two,
Glenn,
go ahead, sir.
Commissioner Lukacs, is this in regards to that item?
Yes, I had a question if I can ask the planning director. You mentioned the August meeting, and I don't know if I was at that meeting or I just watched later, but I remember there was a concern about the ventilation in the chambers. And when I was in October in the chambers at a city council meeting, I was in the audience, and I didn't feel the ventilation. So I don't know if that was something that was fixed or will be fixed, or what's the change on that side?
Yeah, and nor do I know if it's an issue. I do know Chairman Chernick brought that up, and I don't know if the amount of volume has been increased from then. I don't have an answer for you on that, but I can check into it, see if there's been a change in the ventilation or turning over the amount of air that's in there, I think was
Yeah,
his
I mean,
concern.
the CDC is, recommending all buildings, businesses and organizations to increase their ventilation. So I don't know if this was something that was done. And I can see, as commissioners, I think we might have enough space between us and other people, the audience, but the audience, depending how big it could get. And we've seen, our chat rooms here, with plenty of boxes. So that means a lot of people might be in the chambers in the public area. So I'm more concerned about them.
Okay, we can certainly ask the question. That's a good point. And number two, Mr. Chairman, I think we proposed to you, or the council has asked that the Planning Commission get a little bit more involved in interviewing new applicants. So that process is proceeding, and I wanted to go over a couple of dates and how, from staff standpoint, we think it'll work. So they're in recruitment right now, which includes at least one of our full-time positions on the Planning Commission. It started the beginning of this week. It'll end on April 22nd. The clerk goes through and sees who's a valid candidate, and then they will send it forward to staff at basically the end of April, on April 30th. So that gives us basically the month of May to interview, and the council changed things up a little bit. They want the whole board to be involved versus a sub board or an interview committee. So they want everybody to kind of be part of the interviews and be part of the recommendation of who moves forward for council interviews. So the way staff sees it is we could do it a couple of different ways. If we could do it on May 4th, actually have a special meeting where we only do interviews, and then we can think about it and then actually vote on it at your regular meeting on, that would be May 18th. That seems to me as maybe the lowest pressure, and then but maybe we could do it all on May 18th if we don't have a big, heavy agenda. So there's that possibility, and not require a special meeting. But those are kind of the things we're thinking through. I don't know if you have any other input. I think we do have Commissioner Flagg.
My input would be, I know I won't be around that weekend and that previous week. Not necessarily we couldn't go ahead and do it without me, but I just won't be here. I will be in Alaska.
The May 4th time period, right?
Yes. After the 6th, I should be back.
Okay. Well, I don't know what is scheduled for May 18th, so maybe we have a light agenda and we could do both.
Commissioner Kohler.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. One, I guess, is do you want the alternates at the interviews? And then my other question is, so when we're interviewing applicants, is that all going to be open to the public?
Yeah, we would advertise it as a public meeting because technically we'd have a quorum there. I think we could do it as a study session if we're not going to take action on the interview night. Whereas it wouldn't be a public hearing, for instance. So that would be a possibility. I don't know as far as alternates. I think council's really focused on the voting members. You could certainly participate, I would think, but ultimately the vote would be by the regular members and any alternates that had to be called upon.
And then our votes, I guess, for the applicants, that's also public.
What was that? I'm sorry.
So our votes, the votes that the applicants that we vote on, that's also open to the public.
Yes.
Any other thoughts,
I
questions?
don't know that we,
You know, I guess for me, the 4th is open. And I would probably prefer to do it on the 4th. I mean, is there any anticipation for how many candidates there's going to be?
we won't know till the 23rd. But you're right. If we just have a couple of candidates, we could probably do that on the 18th. It wouldn't take a whole lot of time.
Yeah, but if you're getting upwards of even 5, that's going to be, I think if I remember right, there's like 5 to 8 minutes or even longer on the interview process with the city council. So you're talking like 30, 40 minutes worth.
Yeah, right. That was our thinking of.
Yeah, do we want to revisit this at the next meeting? Put it down as an item and then revisit it at the next meeting to decide on a date for this? Does that sound good to everybody?
Sure, in our April meeting?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think people start planning ahead, see if May 4th, which is a Saturday, if that will work for you. And if not, just keep open May 18th, I guess is the second one.
I had a
Oh,
question.
actually, May 4th would be a Wednesday.
Is it a
Yeah.
Wednesday? Oh, I
Yeah,
can't
it's a
If we were
Wednesday.
going on a Wednesday evening.
remember. Okay. Commissioner Lukacs?
Yeah, my question was, so are we making the final decision, or is this a recommendation to the council and they'll have the final approval?
Right, you would be making a recommendation to council, and then they would go forward with their interview, basically,
Oh.
with your input and your
So there will
recommendations.
be a second interview for the applicants.
Right, right. In fact, they even left the door open. If there's one slot and you think you have 2 really good candidates, they want to hear, you can certainly recommend 2 candidates for 1 slot.
And this slot, what's the term? When does this term end? Doesn't it end at the end of this year? So this person will only
That's a
serve for
good
like 6 months?
question.
No, that was,
Jane, do you know?
that was Commissioner Schernick's
Right.
slot that ends this year.
No, I took Commissioner Schernick's slot, and I
Right,
think
yeah.
this is Commissioner Onaran's slot.
It is, but I thought it was Commissioner Schernick's slot ended this year. I believe he only had the 1 year left on his. So unless they both expire at the same time.
They do. Yes, that's correct, Chairman Poland. This is a vacant position that expires this December 31st. So we'll be filling this, or it'll be up again for recruitment at the end of the year.
Okay.
So Commissioner Lukacs, you're correct. You took Chairman Schernick's position, and then Commissioner Honoran turned in his resignation. And we have that position open.
Okay, so it sounds like we're just.
That's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Then with nothing else, I will go ahead and call this meeting an adjournment.
Thanks a bunch.